Which of the following statements about real estate brokerage in North Carolina is true? So they didn't say exception. So you're honestly true. You're actually looking for the right answer. What is actually true about brokerage? So watch for that. If the question says all of the following statements about real estate brokerage in North Carolina are true, except, then you're going to be looking for the one that's not actually the truth about brokerage. All right. So watch that. Don't get the wrong thing in your head. We're looking for the thing that is actually true, though. Provisional brokers must be supervised by a broker in charge while performing brokerage services for compensation. That sounds pretty good.
That one.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably right, but you need to go ahead and scan the rest of them, because the other rule about taking the test is which is the best answer. And sometimes one answer is pretty good, but another answer is a lot better. So just in case that's going on, let's see here. Homeowners must be active brokers to sell their own property. That's not true. They don't have to be a broker to sell your own property. Compensation is always a percentage of the selling price. That's not true. It could be compensated in multiple ways. You could get a bonus. You get a percentage of the sale price plus $1,000 bonus if you sell it in 30 days, or all kinds of different flexible ways. Real estate licensees may perform an appraisal on a parcel of land. We can't do, what we do is not called an appraisal. What we do is a market analysis or a broker price opinion. So yep, A held up. A is the answer. Which of the following is considered to have the greatest impact on the value of a property? Oh boy, this is old material. Area, permanence of investment, scarcity, or uniqueness?
Area.
Yeah, area, because it's that old thing. What's the three most important words in real estate? Location, 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 right? So
Economic.
Yeah. Myers Park, because it's Myers Park in Charlotte, is worth more than Highland Creek. And that's a nice neighborhood too. Myers Park is a unique historic neighborhood that is only so big. It's where it is, location. Which of the following is generally considered real property? Implements, annual crops, shrubs planted in a decorative pot, perennial shrub planted in the backyard. Well, implements, that's a word we've seen before. Annual crops are the property of the farmer. And if they sell their farm, but they still have crops that need to be harvested, they usually have the right to go back and get those crops, even if they close on the property first. That's not it. Decorative pot, if something is in a pot, that makes it portable. That means it's personal property. So a perennial shrub is like an azalea. It comes back. So it's D, perennial, comes back, planted in the backyard, not in a pot.
Because it is a fixed.
What does the phrase bundle of legal rights refer to? It's part of the definition of real property. That sounds pretty good. It's another name for the legal description. No, that's not it. Legal description is like the meets and bounds or a reference to a prior deed. It's one of the legal documents used in a transaction. No, this is just a legal idea. The bundle of legal rights is just a legal concept. It refers to a tenant's rights. No, that's leasehold kind of estate. So 4 is A, part of the definition of real property. When you buy real property, you're getting the property, the improvements on it, and the bundle of legal rights, which includes things like the right to mortgage it, the right to lease it, the right to sell it, the right to put a fence around it. The owner of a house wants to fence in the yard for a dog. What is the process for converting the fencing materials to real estate? A lot of A words. Don't you hate when they use A words? Okay, avulsion. That has to do with water, right? Avulsion is about water, and I think it's the one where water goes away fast and makes land go away fast or something like that. Annexation sounds pretty good, but let's check the other ones. Acceleration. That's
a mortgage.
Yeah, that's if we get behind in our mortgage payment, the lender calls the loan due, they accelerate the mortgage payoff. Accretion is a water term. So best answer is B.
Annexation.
Yeah. Process to convert fence material to real estate. You're annexing the personal property lumber fencing material when you attach it to the real estate. Person has complete control over a parcel of real estate is said to own what type of estate? Complete control. That means the right to sell it. If you're a renter, you don't have the right to sell it. So leasehold is not right. Fee simple sounds pretty good. That's probably it. Let's make a little note of that and keep looking just to be sure. Life estate, you don't have complete control because you're at the mercy of whoever that measuring life is, and that might even be yourself. So don't die, otherwise you're gonna, not that you'd care, but you're gonna lose, and your estate is gonna lose this property. And a defeasible, a fee simple defeasible ownership has a condition too. One of two things. You either have to keep using it as a thing or you may not use it as a thing. So the best one is B. Be simple. Am I going too fast? Is this working? Is this okay?
No, that's fine.
That's good. It's great.
After completing construction on the patio, the owner discovers the patio extends into the setback on the neighboring property. Oh boy, you're crossing the property line. Erosion. Well, erosion is when the soil wears away because of water running down through it. A sheet, that's the process of the
Government.
going to the state if you die without a will and heirs. You don't have a will, you don't have any heirs, then the state is going to take the property through a sheet. Encroachment sounds pretty good because you're encroaching over the line onto the neighbor's property. Entitlement, that's not it. So C is encroachment. The water rights of the property located along the banks of a small stream are called what? So literal rights have to do with what? What kind of feature of water? Like big bodies of water have what? What do oceans do?
Times.
Tides. Literal is about tidal waters. Big lakes also, like the Great Lakes, they can have tides. So small stream doesn't have tides, so that's not it. Subjacent, that's about land support. If somebody gives someone the right to frack or to drill under their property, that person who has the rights to do that drilling has to make sure the surface doesn't get collapsed like with a sinkhole. They have to provide subjacent support. So that's not it. Riparian sounds pretty good. I think riparian, because when I see riparian, I think river, R-I. And the stream's not a river, but it's pretty darn close. It's a baby river, right? So riparian rights have to do with water. And hereditaments, that's not it. So yeah, C, riparian. Which of the following is an ownership right in real estate? Dormer is a kind of window. It's that kind of window that pokes out of the roof and it has its own little roof and it's poking out of the main big roof upstairs, a dormer window. A devisee, that's a party to a transaction. Demographic, that means we're carving up people and categorizing them based on groups like 55 and older or millennials or baby boomers. Disposition, that's the answer. It's an ownership right in real estate. You have the right to disposition, to dispose of.
Disposition.
rid of.
Right.
These kinds of questions are all about the vocabulary, just definitions. The more definitions you know, the more of these questions you can answer because you know what these various words mean. Sometimes they'll put a word in there that's nonsense. It's not even a word or term we ever covered. It just sounds pretty good. So you have to know it well enough to see the junk when you need to and cross that out off the list.
Sí. Papá.
Property owner conveys a life estate to her son-in-law and says upon his death, the estate will pass to her grandson. Okay, property owner conveying a life estate to the son-in-law. When the son-in-law dies, he's the life tenant, the one receiving the estate. He's also the measuring life. So this is a conventional life estate. because it's the same person as both of those roles. But that's not what the question is. The question is when he dies, it's going to not back to her, it's going to her grandson. So the grandson has what type of estate? Remain
Reminder,
reversion.
reminder.
Remainder. It's a third party. It's the grandson. Yeah. This is not pour out B because it's a same person as the life tenant and the measuring life. Pour out B is for the life of another. Measuring life would be a whole different person than the son-in-law. And C and D are the exact same thing. So if C's wrong, D's wrong. A is not right because it's not going back to the property owner if the son-in-law dies. A life estate which conveys based on the life of another. This is the kind of thing where you're like, well, I just saw something like that in the previous question, and that might have spurred your memory. You might think, oh, okay, well, leasehold, that's not it.
Convey.
That's about non-freehold. Reversionary, that's what happens when the life estate person dies. But what is the overall name of this life estate concept about the life of another? Pour out V. So 11 is D. A buyer contracts to purchase real property with the intention of having title transfer to her children upon her death. Which of the following is the best way for this buyer to take title to the purchased property? What she wants to have happen is to be able to leave it to her heirs. So what kinds of estates are right of survivorship that do not go to heirs but go to the remaining co-owners? Because that's not the right answer.
Estate.
Wait, which one did you say was not the right answer?
Anything that has right of survivorship.
So is it conventional?
So joint tenancy is not it because that has right of survivorship. Let's see, fee estate might be right.
Estate because it's mhm.
Conventional life estate, let's see what happens there. In a conventional life estate, if you die, then your heirs definitely don't get it because it's gone. It's either going to revert or go to a remainderman. So that's not it. So it's not A, it's not C. An estate with reversionary interest, well, that's going to go back to who gave it to you. So the only one that lets you leave it to your heirs is B, fee estate.
Estate.
Also, you could call it a fee simple estate, or it could be a fee simple defeasible estate. Both of those kinds are work so that your heirs get it. In both of those kinds, your heirs will get it. Co-owners of a small office building are neither related to nor a creditor to each other. One of the owners dies intestate without a will. The surviving owner would become the sole property owner under which of the following rights? What is it where the co-owner gets the property when their other owner dies? We just talked about it. Right of what?
The survivorship.
Survivorship. You got it. You got it.
Survivorship.
It's not adverse
See.
possession. Because adverse possession is all about getting a property because you used it continuously, openly, exclusively, adversely, notoriously for 20 years. Reversionary interest, that's what happens in a life estate. And foreclosure, that's clearly not it. So survivorship, C. 3 joint tenants own a parcel of land. One owner sells their interest to a longtime friend. Okay, so they're joint tenants. But if one of them sells, then that new owner is not a joint tenant. They are a what?
Tenants come.
Tenant in common. After the conveyance, the remaining original owners would have what ownership relationship? So be careful. The test question writer knows what we're thinking, what we just said, but they're not asking about the new owner. They're asking about the original owners. After the conveyance, the remaining owners have what ownership relationship? Well, they're not tenants in common with each other. They're still joint tenants with each other. So A and B are both not correct because they are not, the original owners are not tenants in common to each other. They're asking what owner relationship for the
Joint tenants with
owner.
each other and new owner.
Joint tenants with each other and the newest owner. That's not right because the newest owner can't be a joint tenant because they weren't one of the original owners.
Mm,
So it's D. 14 is D. They are still joint tenants with each other, but they are tenants in common with the new guy. You okay on that?
Yes.
Which of the
Okay.
following would be required to create a joint tenancy relationship in the ownership of property? Let's see, what would be required to create a joint tenancy? Oh, so there is an actual acronym when it comes to joint tenancy, and the acronym is PITT. For joint
P,
tenancy to work, P is in Paul, ITT, PIT.
Pete.
PIT.
Pete.
So that's letter C. PIT stands for
Time.
possession,
I'm sorry.
time, interest, and title, or possession, interest,
C.
time, and title. To reach the garage on their property, owner utilizes an easement appurtenant that gives the right to use the neighbor's property, the neighboring property's driveway. Neighboring property is what? What's happening here? We've got an owner. They're using an easement appurtenant to go across their neighbor's property. This is the neighbor. This is the owner. And so this neighboring property, it's either dominant or
No.
servient.
Servant.
So which is which? Which one has to allow this usage?
Is servient.
As
Stay.
servient. Servient. This is the servient
Because he get it from me.
because they have to allow it. The dominant gets to use it. They're the ones that get the privilege of having this right. Servient estate is the one that has to allow the easement to go over their property. A lot is encumbered by a sewer easement that runs where the property owner wishes to put the foundation of his house. How will this easement affect placement of the home? It's encumbered. Let's see. Sewer easement.
Easement.
It would have no effect on construction because the sewer line is deeper than the foundation. Well, that's not true. You can't build a house on top of lines. House must be constructed to avoid the easement. That sounds rational and reasonable. That's probably right. The municipality must move the sewer line. Well, that's not going to happen. The city's going to say, well, you need to move around our line. Any easement running through the lot will prevent construction. Well, there's easements running through lots all over the place, and it doesn't prevent construction. You just can't build on top of it. So B is the best answer there.
B.
The second one, house must be constructed to avoid the easement. The North Carolina commercial real estate broker lien serves what purpose? What kind of real estate are we practicing if we are a North Carolina commercial real estate broker?
No.
It's for commercial. So let's see, allows a commercial client to sue a broker for breaching fiduciary. No, it's a broker lien. It's a lien that can be used by the broker. Gives a buyer agent the right to sue the commercial listing agent for compensation. No, that's not it. It's about the broker lien is about the listing broker in a commercial transaction being able to place a lien on the property. Allows a lien to be placed on the commercial property to secure the broker's commission. That sounds right. But let's look at the next one. Requires a commercial broker to place a lien on the listed property at the time of the listing. Well, no, you don't have to place a lien on it. It's just that at some point you might get the feeling that the seller is going to try to do you out of your commission. Therefore, you have the option as a commercial broker to place a lien on the property. So it's C. Allows a lien to be placed, doesn't require a lien to be placed. That's only for commercial. It doesn't work for residential. And it's only for the listing agent who has a listing agreement in writing with that seller. Which of the following is true about a meets and bounds description? Meets and bounds, you're writing a paragraph describing the perimeter of a property. So it must start at a point of beginning and return to the point of beginning. That sounds pretty good. We know that
This
it
say,
has to stop where it started. The final point of measurement is the meridian. Well, no, meridian is a word about government rectangular survey. The initial measurement line is the range line. No, range is another word for government rectangular survey. The measurements are broken up into sections. Nope. Yet again, sections are something in a government rectangular survey. The only thing out of these four that is about meets and bounds is the first one, A. Starts at the beginning and returns to the beginning, ends at the beginning. Title to real property in North Carolina passes when a valid deed is what? What does the deed have to be? What has to be done for the deed for this to be officially done and finished? Not just signed and recorded. I mean, it does need to be recorded, but let's see if there's a better answer. This is a classic example of the best answer kind of thing. Delivered and accepted. Well, that does have to be done, but more important, as well as being delivered and accepted, it needs to be recorded. So one of these answers with recorded in it. Recorded with the registrar of deeds. Yeah, C is the best answer. Recorded at the register of deeds office. That's when title passes to the new owner. Primary purpose of a deed is what? Prove ownership. Well, that's one purpose of it. To transfer title rights. Yeah, that's important too. To give constructive notice. No, that's recording. Prevent adverse possession. That's a nice side effect. The best option here is B, to transfer title rights. An owner needs to sell the property. They need to have a deed which says I'm selling it to this person, and the owner signs off because they're giving the rights to the property to the new owner. An investor bought acreage in a distant county and never went to see it. Oh, this makes me think it's going to be adverse possession. But let's see. He never personally used it, although he regularly paid the taxes on the property. A woman moved her mobile home onto the property, drilled a well for water, and lived there for many years. The woman may have become owner of the acreage if she has met the requirement regarding which of the following. This smells like adverse possession, doesn't it? Intestate succession. No, intestate means you die without a will. That's not it. Adverse possession. Yeah, probably. Covenant of quiet enjoyment. No, that's what you get when you own the property and you have a loan, and that lender gives you your privacy, right? They still care about the property and they can still foreclose, but you have the right to enjoy it without anybody coming along and trying to claim ownership. Statute of limitations, that's just a non-answer. So yeah, adverse possession. She lives there she's using it without permission, but if she does so in a long enough time, because the owner never went to see it, they just mail in their tax check once a year, adverse possession. Which of the following is true regarding a special warranty deed? Okay, special. What do we know about special warranty deed? It's not as good as a general warranty deed. The general warranty deed gives you 5 covenants or promises. The special one only gives you 2. And it's pretty much saying, I will make representation that while I owned it during that limited time, I've not done anything to jeopardize the property or put a lien on it or cause a title cloud problem. So as a little quick, you might want to do that while you're reading the test question, review in your mind what you know about the topic, and then read the answer choices to make sure that they don't confuse you. So grantor makes additional warranties beyond those given in a general warranty deed. That doesn't sound right, because a special warranty deed is not as good as a general warranty deed. Grantor retains an ownership interest in the property. No, they don't get to still own the property. They're selling it, giving it up, passing it along in with the deed. They're warranting that no undisclosed encumbrances exist against the property. Well, that they don't give us enough information here, but based on what that says, they're warranting that no undisclosed encumbrances have ever existed. And a general warranty deed is all about forever and ever. Special warranty deed is just limited to the time the grantor owned the property. So D is the best answer. They're only saying, I stand up for and represent and promise while I owned it, nothing crazy happened. I didn't do anything that created encumbrances or any issues with the property while I owned it, but I'm not claiming before I owned it. For the government to acquire land under the right of eminent domain, what has to happen? The acquisition must be for a public purpose. That sounds pretty good. There must be a statutory dedication. Don't really even remember that phrase being part of the discussion. The owner must agree to the government's taking of the land. They don't have to agree. They still have to give it up, but they're going to get paid for it. There must be constructive notice. Best answer here is 24 is A. The acquisition must be for a public purpose. It has to be for the public good. It can't just be because the government wants your property because it wants it. It must want it to be used for the good of the public, not for the good of the government, not to profit from it, but for the public to be benefiting from it. Which of the following statements about North Carolina deeds is correct? A general warranty deed is the best way for the buyer to receive title. That sounds good. That's probably it. A special warranty deed gives the seller the greatest degree of liability. That is not correct. The bargain and sale deed is very much like a special warranty deed. That's not right. Special warranty deed is better than a bargain and sale deed. The gift deed must be recorded within 30 days to remain valid. That's not right. It's 2 years. Gift deed must be recorded within 2 years in order to remain valid. So if anybody ever gives you a free property and gives you a gift deed, hurry up and record it in case they decide to take it back, because then you can't do anything about it. Best choice, best answer there is A. Which of the following would be used to clear a defect from title records? How are we clearing a defect? It's not a lis pendens. That's something that has to do with a lawsuit or a court case. Estoppel certificate, we didn't even talk about that. Quiet title suit, that's the answer. Quiet title suit is used to clear a defect from title records. You're quieting the defect. You're solving it. You're putting it to rest. The North
Yeah, while you're there, what's the writ of attachment again?
bit of attachment. Let me think. That has to do with a lawsuit too. Let me look it up just to give you a better answer. Bit of attachment, you can look it up in the back of your book as well. At the request of a creditor, the court retains custody of the property during the lawsuit to ensure the property remains available to satisfy the judgment. So it's making sure that the person doesn't sell the property before the lawsuit is decided upon, so that the property can be used in case the seller is determined to need to pay the other party.
Okay.
The Marketable Title Act guarantees that general warranty deeds transferred in North Carolina are free of defects. No, that's not it. States that a title search conducted on a property's history that goes back 30 years will extinguish any defects before those 30 years. That's the right answer. Let's check the rest of them. Negates all claims through adverse possession. That's not even a thing. That doesn't make sense. Requires title searches to review the chain of title since North Carolina became a state. No, not that far back. That was like hundreds of years. Just 30 years. The attorney just needs to search back 30 years. Anything that happened before 30 years ago is a non-issue. That does not affect the title. Any defects more than 30 years old are no longer a problem. That's what the Marketable Title Act says. Under the Connor Act, which of the following documents must be recorded to be valid against third-party claims? Well, let's see, a lease for 3 years. Well, that's suspicious because anytime we see the word 3 years and lease, we have to realize, oh, it's not for 3 years, it's 3 years, it's more than 3 years. If this said a lease for more than 3 years, then that would be the answer or one of the answers. Because the other right answer is the deed of trust. The deed of trust must be recorded to be valid against third-party claims. Offer to purchase, no. Promissory note, no. Deed of trust. An attorney's statement indicates that the quality of title as of a certain time is a what? When the attorney does the title search and sees that everything's good, the attorney is going to tell the title insurance company, it is my opinion that this looks great. You are safe to issue a title insurance policy for this property. So it's B. The attorney will do a search and then give an opinion, title opinion. Deed restrictions are a means by which local zoning laws are enforced. No, those are two separate things. Deed restrictions are a private land use control. Zoning laws are a public land use control, so it's not A. Planning commission controls developers. No, that's not about deed restrictions. Again, planning commission and developers, that would be a zoning related thing. Municipalities enforce building restrictions. That's not it. That's more of a public government thing. Grantors control the future use of grantees. Yeah, that's it. D. When you, the grantor, decide to sell your property, you can sell it to somebody and require that they do certain things with it or that they can't do certain things with it. It's just that if you choose to have deed restrictions on your property when you sell it, it might take you longer to find a buyer willing to follow your rules that you required. A very common one is like a neighborhood that's not in an HOA, but it's a formal neighborhood, and the deed restriction includes the requirement that whoever builds in that neighborhood must build at least a 2,500 square foot brick single story because they want them all to look similar. So that could be a deed restriction. That's a private deed restriction, not a zoning related thing. Zoning is public. In North Carolina, a subdivision must meet which of the following? Subdivision, okay. Final subdivision plat must be recorded before closing on any lot. That sounds really good. I think that's probably it. Subdivision is any parcel of land divided into 5 or more lots. Well, that's just not true. How many lots, divisions can a piece of land be divided before it becomes a subdivision? What's the minimum number for a subdivision?
2.
Just two, not 5. So that's not right. B is not right. Subdivision must meet what? Contract to purchase any lot that is not, any lot is not allowed until the final plat is recorded. Well, no, you can write a contract while you have a preliminary plat map, but that contract can't close until the preliminary plat map becomes the final one and is recorded, which is answer A. But let's read the last one. So streets must be privately maintained by the developer until the last lot is sold to the public. No, they usually are, but they don't have to be. That developer could go ahead and dedicate the street. They've built it to the right specifications. They dedicate it to public maintenance, and the DOT says, okay, yes, we will accept responsibility for your streets. They are now hereby public streets, publicly maintained. That could happen sooner than the very end of the subdivision being finished. It could happen and there's also different phases that happen. It could happen if it's a 5-phase neighborhood. Maybe that happened after phase 3. So D is not the answer. It's A. A is the answer. Which of the following best describes a variance? An exception to to a zoning ordinance. You're varying the ordinance. So A is the best answer here, but let's keep looking. Variance, is that a court order prohibiting uses? No, not a court order. Is it a pre-existing use that varies from the current code? No, that's not it. That's the grandfathering in. That is a non-conforming use would be what C is. A comprehensive land use amendment for an area? Nope, that's not it. Best answer is 32 is A, an exception to a zoning ordinance. It's called a variance. Whether subdivision streets are publicly or privately owned and maintained is what? A required disclosure of the developer on any transaction or any resale transaction. Well, the developer is not responsible for what happens the second time something sells, just when they sell, because the resale, the developer is not a party to a resale. A resale means a used property, not a new construction. So the current owner, the owner that buys it from the developer, when they sell it to the second owner, that's a resale. But when the first owner ever buys it straight from the developer who created it, that would be a new construction. That is not a resale. So it's not A. Public or privately owned or maintained, a material fact that must always be disclosed by a broker. That sounds really good. Information that a broker must disclose only in new construction. That is not true. Even when we sell resale properties that are not new construction, it is on our shoulders responsibility as brokers to find out and tell people, is this a public street or a privately maintained street? Or is it information that must be disclosed only if asked about? Well, no, that is not a stigmatized property category. Things that are stigmatized properties that you disclose only if they ask you are haunted houses, sex offender nearby, and death in the house. This is none of those. So best answer here is B. Must always be disclosed by a broker as a material fact. Which of the following would be dual agency? Broker in charge assisting a buyer client in the purchase of a property that was listed by a provisional broker of the broker in charge's firm. B, provisional broker and a broker from firms that are that are cooperating in a transaction. C, a firm that represents buyers and sellers. Or D, broker finding a buyer for a property the broker personally listed, which would be dual agency. A, broker in charge assisting a buyer client in the purchase of a property that was listed by a provisional broker of the broker in charge's firm. Don't confuse dual agency with designated dual agency. And don't get so caught up in thinking, oh, wait, a broker in charge cannot be a designated agent on the other side of a transaction against their provisional broker. That is true, but in this case, we're not talking about designated dual agency, just plain dual agency. And you can have a broker in charge and a provisional broker of the same firm who are both dual agents. That means both of them are limited in loyalty. They can't be loyal to both parties. That both broker in charge and their provisional acting as a dual agent can't tell the buyer the lowest the seller would take. Can't tell the seller the most the buyer is willing to pay. They're both acting as dual agents, and that is allowed, and that is okay.
And why not is the C firm that represent buyer and seller?
Let's see. What the file will be doing? Firm that represents buyers and sellers.
It's not the same.
Well,
For example,
it's not being specific enough. That's just saying you represent buyers and sellers. If it said in the same transaction, that'd be a better answer. But represent buyers and sellers, they could represent a buyer over here buying any property, even with other firms, or a seller, they've listed a property and any buyer from another firm could come buy their listing. So it's not specifically talking about in the same single transaction. But it's easy to think that. When I first scanned it, I'm thinking, oh, wait, oh, yeah, okay. Not the same transaction. They don't specifically say same transaction. North Carolina provisional broker may advertise a property only if the broker what? Has personally listed the property? No, that's not true. Uses the employing broker's name or the firm's name in the advertisement. Yeah, that's true. Has personally paid for the advertisement. That doesn't matter. You can try to get anybody you want to pay for your ad. Good luck. Maintains active membership in an MLS. No, that is not a requirement for advertising. If you have the permission of the listing broker and the seller, then you can advertise whatever property you want, provisional or otherwise. So best choice answer here is B, 35B.
Uh-oh.
Seller has a home with a listing agent for $675. I'm going to be for the background noise. Seller has listed a home with a listing agent for $675. The seller is moving because they have experienced a layoff at work and can't make payments. They're good for about 3 months and then foreclosure is likely. Listing agent is holding an open house and meets a prospective buyer who asks about the seller's motivation. The agent explains the seller's circumstance to the buyer and urges them to make an offer if they like the house so it does not go into foreclosure. Buyer tells the listing agent that they love the house and can offer a quick close because they just inherited $1 million from a family member and can pay cash quickly. The buyer offers $600,000, which the seller immediately accepts. In this situation, what is true? Did the listing agent violate their agent relationship with the seller? Sounds to me like they did, because foreclosure is not what happened. It may be likely, but has it happened yet? No. Then it's not a disclosable fact. Just because, listen to this, because this is a testable item. Just because somebody is late on their mortgage payments, that is not a material fact. It is not a material fact that a seller is behind on their mortgage payment. When it becomes a material fact is when the foreclosure process has begun. So if the seller received the foreclosure notice, that is a material fact. The broker would be allowed and required to tell everybody, and required, it's a disclosure, must disclose material fact. But in this case, they were laid off. They know they can't make their payment, and they're not even behind, actually. They just know that in 3 months, if things don't get better, they're gonna probably be behind. They're gonna probably be foreclosed. So 36 is A. Let's look at the other ones though. The listing agent's action was acceptable since the seller accepted the offer. Well, no. The listing agent cheated the seller out of some money because they told the buyer about the seller's motivation, and the seller was desperate, but it wasn't in their place to tell about the seller being desperate. The listing agent acted properly to obtain a quick offer and quick close. No, they did not act properly. They acted properly because agents are encouraged to solicit bids. No, you can't give away the confidentiality of your client. They did not act properly. In a typical agency relationship between an agent and a client, the agent's commission is determined by what? Is commission determined by state law? No. Is the commission determined by the local board? Do they require us to charge a certain commission? No. Is commission determined by mutual agreement between the agent and the client? Yes, that's the right answer. Are minimums based on the property type and price? Not necessarily. It's totally negotiable. So best answer is C. Upon discovering a latent defect in a property, latent defect means the seller hid the fact. It's okay that a seller doesn't tell about a defect if they use the disclosure and say no representation, I'm not telling. But if they intentionally cover something up so that nobody ever has a chance of possibly ever finding it, that's not okay. That's something that a buyer could come after the fact of closing and sue them over because they made it impossible to be found. That is not okay. So a listing agent should discuss the problem with the seller and take what action? Inform the seller that the defect must be repaired or the home cannot be placed for sale. So we're not even closed yet. We just have a listing agent talking about it with the seller. and the agent knows about the defect. So that means the agent has to disclose it. Arrange and pay for repairs as required by the terms of the typical listing agreement. Not necessarily true. Inform any prospective buyers of the defect or contact the building inspector about the defect. The agent's responsibility is to disclose. So C, inform prospective buyers of the defect. But other choices, have the seller fix it. Then you don't have to worry about it. Then it's a non-issue. But of the choices they gave us, C is the best answer. Which of the following would not be required for a North Carolina broker to be entitled to receive a commission? Not required to receive commission. Doesn't matter if you receive the commission. Buyer has an active North Carolina real estate license. Well, that is required to receive commission. Broker was the procuring cause for the transaction. That is required. Broker was employed to perform certain activities in the transaction. That is required. Broker membership in the National Association of Realtors. Is that required for a broker to receive commission? No. You don't have to belong to the Association of Realtors. You are still eligible to receive commission because you can receive commission in lots of ways. One example is as a referral fee. And in 2008, 9, and 10, when people decided they couldn't afford to stay in real estate, one of the things they did was keep their license, but give up their membership to the real estate, to the Association of Realtors. Because that's like, now it's almost $600 a year. It was a way for them to save money, but still keep their real estate license. And they could have still helped somebody buy and sell and make money. They could also have still sent a referral and got paid a referral fee. So you don't have to belong to the Realtor Association to make money. But you do have to belong to it to make your life a lot easier, because it facilitates having access to the forms that they write. You can't use the standard forms provided by the Realtor Association if you don't belong to the Realtor Association. But that doesn't limit your ability to earn money. North Carolina broker verbally agrees to represent a prospective buyer, even though the buyer declined to sign a buyer agency agreement. Is that okay? So far, they can represent a buyer, do some things, and show properties without it being in writing. Broker neglected to revisit the agency issue. Uh-oh, this sounds bad. Before showing the buyer a suitable property. Therefore, while showing the property, the agent has a fiduciary duty to which party? Seller, the buyer, nobody, or the public? Well, what can an agent do without a written agreement? All they've done is stated it orally, verbally, that they're going to act for you as a buyer agent. Can they still show property with an oral? Yeah, sure they can. So while showing property, the agent still has a fiduciary duty to the buyer. We're still good. If the test question went on to say the buyer picked the property and now the agent is writing an offer, well, now if they still have agency that's not in writing, now the agent is going to become a sub-agent to the seller. At the time of offer and beyond, offer being accepted, and the buyer refuses to put the agency agreement in writing, then it can't be an oral buyer agency agreement anymore. That goes away. And by default, the agent becomes a sub-agent to the seller. In this test question, all they're doing here is showing property. They're not writing an offer yet. So they still represent the buyer, even though the agency agreement is not in writing. It's still a verbal oral agreement. Therefore, buyer's still your guy. Buyer's still your fiduciary responsibility. North Carolina provisional broker may accept compensation from who? The employing broker of the provisional broker, that is true. You can only get paid by your broker in charge. You can't get paid by a different broker in charge from a different firm. You can't get paid by the principal of the provisional broker. If you list a property with the seller, for the seller, a seller can't pay you directly. They have to pay the money from the seller goes to your firm, to your BIC, and your BIC gives you your part. Co-brokerage BIC, nope. Can't get paid by any other BIC besides your own. Lender underwriting the loan, nope. Just your BIC is who can pay you. The real estate firm practices all legal forms of agency allowed in North Carolina. If one of the firm's buyer clients is interested in buying property listed with the firm must do what? Decline to act as a dual agent and refer the buyer to another firm? Well, no, they do. They've said that they do all kinds. They practice all kinds. Require both clients to sign agency agreements prior to the close of the transaction? No, best choice here is C, disclose the agency options available and obtain written consent from both clients to act as a dual agent. So C is the best answer here. Act as a facilitator rather than fiduciary? No, we don't do facilitator. We are representing somebody. You have to represent somebody. How we doing here? You want to take a break? Any questions? Any other questions you're thinking about while I've been rambling on?
No questions here.
Is this useful?
Yes.
Let's do a few more of these big ones. My voice is giving out. But let's see here. Which of the following best describes a designated agency transaction? Listing firm appointing an agent to represent the seller. No. That's not designated agency. Selling firm appointing an agent to represent the buyer. No, because that's just plain old buyer agency. Broker in charge appointing some agents in the firm to represent buyers exclusively and other agents to represent sellers exclusively. We still haven't talked about a same transaction, because if it's designated agency, that is dual, designated dual. So I haven't seen any mention of a dual agency scenario yet. D, broker in charge appointing one agent to exclusively represent the seller as a client and a different agent to exclusively represent the buyer as a client, while the firm remains in dual agency. That's a good answer. So 43 is D. If the broker in charge is to act as one of the designated agents for a North Carolina in-house transaction, dual agency, which of the following may be appointed as the designated agent for the other party in the transaction? Broker in charge is a designated agent. Can a broker in charge be up against an actively licensed provisional within the firm? No, they cannot. So that's not a good answer. Can they be up against an actively licensed broker within the firm who has no prior confidential knowledge of the party the BIC will represent? That sounds pretty good, but let's keep looking. Broker in charge cannot be a designated agent. That's not true. An actively licensed provisional broker within the firm, if the provisional broker has no confidential information about the BIC's client. In no case may a provisional broker in a firm be against their own BIC in that same firm as designated agent. So best answer here is B. Which of the following will be an example of a stigmatized property which requires disclosure in North Carolina? Stigmatized condition about which a consumer has inquired. No, let's see. Yeah, that's a good one. Stigmatized conditions are required to be disclosed by all brokers. No, that's not true. Former occupant has AIDS or HIV. That is absolutely not allowed because that's a violation of the disability provision in fair housing. Stigmatized conditions are required to be disclosed. Nope, they are not. So stigmatized condition about which a consumer has inquired, when they ask about it, you have to tell the truth. But if they don't ask about it, you don't have to bring it up. Oral buyer agency must be non-exclusive and have no expiration date. That is correct. You can be an oral buyer agent forever and ever and ever, as long as you never write an offer. That's not a great way to make money and pay the bills. Oral buyer agency must be reduced to writing prior to showing property. Nope, you can show it and remain that oral buyer agent. Details of the agency agreement may be delayed until written agency occurs. Nope, because even with oral buyer agency, you have to explain to them what it all means. And all you're not doing, only thing you're not doing with oral buyer agency is writing it down and getting it in writing signatures. You still explain it all. Cannot include the dual agency option. Yeah, you can still do dual agency as oral buyer agency. It's just you need to explain it. Make sure they understand the dual agency part of it too. What consumers in North Carolina must the working with the real estate agents brochure be given to? All property owners upon initial contact. No, not initial contact. All consumers prior to first substantial contact. Not prior to, at first substantial contact. Unrepresented buyers in a for sale by owner transaction. Best answer here is D. All consumers in a transaction which involve a broker no later than first substantial contact. What's wrong with C? Why is C not the right answer?
Unrepresented sale by owner.
Is an agent even involved? If there's an
No.
unrepresented buyer buying it for sale by owner, we have an unrepresented buyer and an unrepresented seller. There's no agent in the fight. And so the working with agents brochure is not necessary if there's no agent with whom anyone is working. So yeah, that's why C is not it. Let's look at this 51. A listing agent schedules an appointment to present an offer to purchase to the seller. Seller has serious health problems and her son is attending to her health care. When the listing agent arrives, he finds the seller's son and daughter-in-law present. In their presence, both son and daughter-in-law persistently urge the seller to accept the offer to purchase as written. Seller is reluctant to accept since the offer is substantially less than the list price. If the seller accepts the offer to purchase under these circumstances, she may later claim what? That the listing agent should not have presented such a low offer for her property. Well, no, that's not right because we have to present all offers. She was under undue influence from her son and daughter-in-law, and therefore the contract is voidable. That sounds pretty good because it sounds like they were really pressuring her, and that's called undue influence. The listing agent defrauded her by allowing her daughter and son-in-law to see the offer to purchase he brought her. Well, that's up to them. Daughter, son-in-law, and the seller. Sure, the agent should make sure the seller's okay with talking about it in front of them, but that's not the agent's problem here. Her consumer protection rights under antitrust laws were violated. No, that's not it. Best answer here is B, second choice, 51B. Seller and buyer have signed a standard offer to purchase. After back and forth about repair negotiations, the seller is fed up with the buyer's continued pressure for the seller to make concessions. The seller claims the buyer is not negotiating in good faith since the offer to purchase is an as-is contract. While they are still in the due diligence period, the seller sends a unilateral notice of termination. Assuming that the buyer wishes to move forward with the contract, the best course of action for the buyer at this point is to do what? Seller's breaching the contract. What happens when the seller breaches the contract?
When the seller breaches, they have to
specific
give the money
performance.
back.
Performance.
Yes, you can sue for specific performance. The remedy available to the buyer when a seller breaches is to sue them for specific performance. So 52 is A. Best answer is A. It's not to file a suit for compensatory damages. It's not to file a suit for rescission of the contract. not to file a suit for liquidated damages. Liquidated damages is what the seller gets if the buyer breaches. And those liquidated damages are in the form of the earnest money and the due diligence fee.